Hello, hello, and welcome back to Amplify My Impact. I am Kaci Brown, and I am thrilled to be with you and to dive into a three-part series. And I want to come right out of the gate and say, first, thank you for being here. I know that the work that we're doing is hard and it takes commitment and it looks different for every single person, depending on where you're at in life, what your goals are, how you are prioritizing the application. Is this going to priority be your business, your life, your relationships, your children, yourself, your own well being and care? So, for that, I honor you being here. And my commitment to you is no holds barred to honestly share authentically and vulnerable. And there might be some things that make you a little uncomfortable, make you wiggle a little bit. I always like to encourage, especially on an individual level when I'm working with clients, that we are literally living on the fringe of our comfort zones. And so you're here, you showed up for that, and I'm excited to walk you through it. So, over the years, especially the last 3 years, I started working on organizing some of my internal operating mode. And I've come to call it essentially like how you do the work. And that is essentially how, as an acronym, habit of winning. So when I say that, there are things that make us who we are. The way that we were raised, our experiences, the way that we dealt with rejection, and the way that we were loved or cared for or even ignored in childhood. We all have that subconscious trauma that in many ways, when we experienced it at such a young age, we were not equipped with the tools to process it. So some things we put in a box and we created little absolutes of like never and always, or this is how, people treat me, or we created stories. And sometimes those stories creep into our everyday lives, our businesses, our relationships without even knowing it. So throughout the whole podcast, and especially the work that we're doing over the next 3 episodes with habits, I want to encourage you to be curious. That if something triggers you, or you hear me say something, or it might connect to another thought, follow it down and get curious to see, why was that? Why did that happen? Why do I feel this way? What are these feelings? What is the source? And I do that because the more awareness that you develop for your thoughts and your feelings, and honestly being unapologetic about having them as a human in the first place, the more you will step into not only your zone of genius, but completely owning your purpose and the alignment and the calling of your soul. So there's some things that we kind of have to get curious about, like turn on some lights and grab a microscope, and you may have heard of it as shadow work, but I'm just going to invite you to have a childlike curiosity over these next 3 episodes. And I'll tell you why. One of the biggest reasons is because I had the incredible pleasure over the years when I was coaching in 2CCX and a student in 2CCX, which is a program through Russell Brunson, or was a program through Russell Brunson, and working with Alex Sharfin. Alex is known in our industry as just an incredible dynamic leader. He talks about the entrepreneur personality type, how we're wired, very, very structured and operational, but also very human and understanding the internal game that day in and day out entrepreneurs experience and honestly humans experience. We all have internal negative self-talk. But he had a quote that he would always say, and it stuck with me for years. What got you here will not get you there. And I've learned that there are certain dichotomies that come at us in life and in lessons. And while 90% of that quote is true, there is a certain part that we remain true to ourselves, our true, authentic, aligned soul calling. So I fought with that for a long time. So before we dive into this, because the 90% truth is that our mindset, how we think, what we say, what we do, how we get into action, how we stay into action, how we've always done it, most likely will not continue to serve us moving forward, stepping into a greater vision, growing beyond our comfort zones, and literally taking the next steps in our calling. But I say that with a caveat that there's certain things that are non-negotiable that I will never leave behind. I will never leave behind my empathy, my care for others, my consideration of others, the way that I operate with impact first and service first. If I'm structuring something in business or even on a personal side, there needs to be a win-win-win scenario. Like I can't be the only one that walks away with a win. So those are some internal operating principles for me and myself that I don't feel applies to the what got me here will not get me there. I feel like a lot of that is why I'm here, and it is 100% very instrumental in creating my future. So that little dynamic, I guess, little truth nugget for you there as we move forward. But what I really want to focus on is the habits of winning. And for me, the way that I describe these are essentially they're the micro actions that we do day in and day out. For me, habits of winning is, for an example, being highly aware of my intention in how that I am operating, how that I am being, how that I am communicating. So that kind of plays back to be, do, have. Be, do, have is a principle essentially before you start doing anything or before you say, this is what I want, pay attention to how you are being, like how you're breathing, how you feel, like is your body tense? Is it relaxed? Or are you neutral? Are you excited? What is that? How are you being? And then the way that you operate is how you do the doing. There is something about the energy that we create in, and I always tell anyone that I'm working with, and a lot of the work that I do is with creatives and business owners, and we're creating solutions for the marketplace. We're creating offers. We're creating copy for email or sales pages or social content for our audience to connect with us. And I tell them all of the time to pay attention to the energy that they're creating that particular task in. If I'm doing something in frustration or begrudgingly, or because I'm just trying to rush and get it out the door, or I'm walking in frustration over, a call or something that didn't go my way, I'm carrying that energy into the creation. So, at the core of the habits of winning and the series that we're covering together is, how are you being? That level of awareness. So I want to share a little bit of a story on how I get grounded and how I am being. And you'll hear and notice certain language patterns that I use, and it's very, very, very intentional. I was really blessed in college to go to one of my classes where a professor, like within the first few days, he challenged us and he said, I want you to eliminate one word from your vocabulary, and it is can't. And I said, I want you to replace it with choose not to. And so we did. And it's interesting because I talked to my husband about it, and he ended up having the same professor. So we were so lucky and blessed, in early 20s to have this little habit in our arsenal where we're literally changing our vocabulary and our minds in real time. So if you think about it, especially if you have children, I can't. And then they change it to I choose not to. But it's also powerful where if you're invited to a party and you say, I'm sorry, I can't, it's I choose not to, which then said it allows for a little bit of self-discovery. Why are you choosing not to, right? Another thing that just brought a memory of Alex Sharfin up is he would always say, if you want to show me your priorities, open up your calendar. And so that is the one thing is that just that power of awareness and realizing everything that you do, you are choosing. Everything you allow into your life. And that stings a little. So let's talk about how we can kind of filter what we do want in our life and what we don't want in our life. And so one of my most powerful lessons was in my way of being is getting grounded in gratitude. This was a lesson I went kicking and screaming into because it was during the time that Adam had been diagnosed. We were approaching his first brain surgery, and I was an absolute mess. He was cool, calm, and collected, full of faith, and I felt so guilty and so shameful for not being able to shift right into faith and fully trusting God and surrendering everything. But I was fighting tooth and nail with every bit of my body and my soul and my energy. And it was during one of these conversations with God, and I say conversations, but it was really like a big argument and cussing match, that I realized if it was my child who was hurt and feeling uncertain and scared and worried, because everything that we had in front of us was completely uncertain. We didn't have a clear path. We didn't know what we were dealing with. We didn't know where we were going to have surgery, who was going to perform the surgery. And so much day in and day out is a consistent recipe, on my hand anyway, of frustration, anger, and then guilt, shame, everything in between. And on top of it all, I kept these episodes private and didn't share them publicly with anyone because I didn't want them to worry about me on top of what we were dealing with. Like, the thing that we really needed to focus on was Adam, and I didn't want anyone worried about how I was processing or feeling. So I started diving into a lot of books, definitely reading a lot of Viktor Frankl. I've always been an optimist, rose-colored glasses. So I decided to start every time that I worried about something or was starting to feel that spiral come on outside of control or that anxiety take over me, I would just start listing 10 things that I was grateful for. And it was just completely random things. It could be air conditioning, toast, warm, fuzzy socks. Of course, the kids and my family and Adam and everything. But it was like when you're doing 10 daily, it literally comes down to like, I'm thankful for Smucker's Uncrustables, so it's easy to make quick lunches for my kids. I'm thankful for mechanical pencils. Like, it's an incredible practice. So I did that every single day, several times a day. So much so that it just became so automatic. And even to this day, if I feel frustrated or disappointed, it is my go-to to help me cycle through the emotions. So this is another 2-part little lesson that I want to share with you. Besides grounding in gratitude as a habit, it was also two-sided to feeling all of my other emotions too. I think the world that we live in, it's very dangerous to step into toxic positivity because many times I was living it. I was putting on a mask, smiling, and no one knew the pain and turmoil that was going on behind it. And, I had some coping mechanisms of how to shift out of it quickly or how to compartmentalize it, but all that was going to lead to was a eventual volcano eruption. So in that kind of moment where I described if my kids had come to me and they were just devastated and angry and mad, and sometimes when you're feeling all of the emotions, there are no words. You kick and you scream and you cry. And I had this vision of me just being there, being present and holding them through it and letting them feel every single feeling and not needing to say a word or having to say a word to them, but just being there. And I had a little light bulb moment where that's the same way God loves me. So I can let go of my guilt and let go of my shame because God made me as a human to feel the whole spectrum of emotions. There are going to be times in my life where I get frustrated, where I'm disappointed, where I feel guilty or I feel shameful, and I feel these things. The feeling doesn't make me wrong, and the feeling is not bad. What I choose to do in the feeling and after acknowledging the feeling, I am 100% responsible for. So at that point, the language pattern enters and it says, I am choosing frustration. I am choosing anger. And it is so powerful to acknowledge and name the emotion that you're feeling and say, I'm choosing gratitude. I'm choosing joy. I'm choosing forgiveness. So that was one huge, powerful shift in the way that I operated, which is absolutely a core habit, but also like daily, multiple times a day habit. So in that, I want to share a story also, hat tip to Mark Stern, because I want to illustrate this, and this was such a powerful illustration that we discovered. We were together at, we had both in Vegas attending the last Funnel Hacking Lab event and had met for breakfast that turned into like right into lunch. So it was a couple hours of catching up and visiting and just talking and sharing, because there are definitely some parts of 2024 that hit hard and hurt. And so you are processing some emotion. And I was still kind of at that point in time, still raw from some things that I was processing and carrying myself. And this conversation meandered from everything from, what we had been doing, his marathons and the competitions and, his health journey, my health journey. And somehow we got on the subject of horror movies and made the connection of just Mark said out of nowhere, where it's like, Cassie, do you know how to kill a demon? And like for me, I want to get things right, right? So I am a, what is that? I can't think of the personality test right now. I'm a wing 3 or 3 wing 2. It starts with an E, and I know it's on the tip of my tongue. Enneagram. So anyways, I want to get this right, and I'm going through my arsenal. I'm like, vampire, I gotcha. Werewolf, I gotcha, right? I'm a huge Twilight fan. That's just my era, right? And he says, you name it. And he's like, all of these emotions that we're feeling, all of these, fears and doubts that we're carrying, they're like demons that attack us out of nowhere. Or it's just this looming, maniacal threat that it's just whispering. And he was like, you name it. And so I tell you what, the second part of that conversation was just so powerful, because when you say it and you say, I've been frustrated, I've cried, I've been angry, it just literally dissipates the emotion and it takes it away. And I know some of you may be feeling, wow, you're spending quite a bit of time on emotion and this habit of grounding and gratitude. And I just want to tell you, this is everything. The energy and how you operate and how you carry yourself day to day. The lens that you look through the world will literally be one of empowerment and opportunity, or you're stuck in the language of I can't. And I want to get as many people out of that box as I can, because you are more capable than you know. You are 100% stronger than you have ever imagined. You can encounter things and overcome things that you didn't in your wildest dreams think you were capable of. And I'll tell you why. I know it's because I have. I thought Adam's diagnosis would absolutely break me. But we were stronger than we thought. And actually, through the process, discovered that surrendering was absolutely one of the biggest strengths we would have in moving forward in life. That the perspective that we were gifted through that experience gave us a gift that very few people get to experience in their lives. And we both committed during that time that with every breath and with every effort and in every action, that we would pay those blessings forward with every ounce of our soul. And that is what impact is about. Starting right where you are at with this one small little habit, the way that you talk to yourself, the way that you process the world around you. This is one part of the habit of winning, and I have so many more to dive in with you over the next few episodes, but I think this is a great stopping point, and I do want to emphasize Adam is okay. He came out of that first surgery with complications that did knock us sideways. I will say here, when you think you've went through everything that you can handle, and then there's more, and you handle it and you come through it, you get to a point in life where I feel like there is nothing that we can't face because we've always figured out a way. And that's what this being grounded in gratitude is all about. So his surgery had incredible complications. He ended up having to be in the ICU for 10 days, was released on condition only of going straight into a 30-day inpatient rehab facility. And that was over Christmas. So we spent Christmas as a family in the rehab facility. And then after about, he came home in a wheelchair, which he absolutely loathed, and continued therapy, occupational therapy, to learn how to walk again and fine motor skill movements. And he had to do speech therapy as well. And I tell you, it was a big day where him and Hudson got to put that wheelchair out. And it was just inspiring. But it was a hard road, definitely the first 6 months. But we figured it out. And we were good. There were some cycles of some low-dose chemotherapy in there, as there was a little bit of tumor activity. They weren't able to get everything during the first surgery. And then in 2020, what was left of the brain tumor developed into cancer. And he had a second surgery in 2020. And that was a very, very hard year. Opened up more arguments with God, because at that point I said, whoa. We've been through this. We've been faithful. We've surrendered. We've shifted our priorities. But sometimes God knows more than you do. And I got to surrender. And I got to enhance my skill set and habit of surrendering. But grounding in gratitude cycled us through. And so far during that second surgery, it was just absolutely beautiful to walk in and see him completely coherent. The next day we locked eyes and I knew everything had been okay. There wasn't any complications. We were able to go home and literally didn't have to do any additional therapy at that point. The first surgery did leave permanent damage of the portion of his brain that controls the left-hand side of his body. So he does walk with drop foot like a stroke victim would, and limited mobility in his left hand, but it doesn't stop him from doing anything. If you ever meet him, you probably would recognize that there's a scar, but other than that, there's nothing that limits that man. And I will just say, this summer, we will be celebrating 5 years of consistent, stable MRIs. And we are currently at every 6 months. So it's a lot to celebrate. It's a lot to be grateful for. And I hope that this helps you understand and anchor the power of gratitude that I've experienced in my own life, that you have the same tools to unlock and leverage in your life. So with that, I will say thank you for listening, and we will meet again on the next episode of Amplify My Impact.